The moment my father stood up at my sister's wedding reception and tapped his champagne glass, I felt my stomach drop. Not because I was nervous for him, because I knew, in the specific bone-deep way you know things you've spent years pretending not to know, that whatever was coming out of his mouth next was going to be about me. He didn't disappoint. "I want to say something about my daughters," Richard Calloway began, his voice amplified by the microphone the DJ handed him without question. "Priya has always been our pride. Always. From her first day at Westlake Academy all the way to this beautiful moment." A pause, one of those theatrical pauses that a man practices in the mirror. And then there's Maya, laughter, nervous, confused, rippling through 160 people who were 2 glasses of Veuve Clicquot into a Saturday evening, and not yet sure whether they were supposed to laugh. I was sitting at table 7. The family table was table 1. I want you to understand something before I go any further. With this story, I've been sitting at the wrong table at my own family's events my entire life. That is not a metaphor. That is a fact I only understood fully the night I was publicly humiliated in front of 160 people in a $4,800 dress I had purchased myself at my sister's wedding. What I didn't know, what nobody at that reception knew, was that my phone was about to receive a text message that would unravel 27 years of a lie so elaborate it had its own paper trail. But to understand why that text destroyed me and then rebuilt me from the ground up, I need to take you back to the beginning. Not the beginning of the wedding. The beginning of being the wrong daughter. I was born Maya Calloway on March 3, 1994 in Austin, Texas. My sister Priya was born 14 months later. By the time we were both in elementary school, the dynamic was already so calcified that I can trace it back to specific photographs. There is a framed photo in my parents' living room in the Tarrytown neighborhood of Austin, 3,400 square feet, worth approximately $1.2 million now, and in that photo, my mother Sunita is holding Priya. I am standing slightly to the left, slightly out of frame, one arm cropped by the edge of the picture. I have looked at that photo my entire life without registering what it was telling me. The Calloways were, by every external measurement, a successful family. My father ran Calloway Integrated Solutions, a mid-sized logistics consulting firm he'd built over 22 years. My mother was a former finance director who had stepped back from her career when I was born. We went to private school. We vacationed in Sedona, Arizona every summer. My parents drove matching gray BMW 5 Series, his and hers, parked side by side in the garage like a brochure for a life. I was not a failure. I want to be clear about that. I graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a degree in computer science and a 3.7 GPA. I got a job at Meridian Tech Solutions in Austin 2 months after graduation, starting at $78,000. By the time I was 25, I had been promoted twice and was earning $104,000 as a senior software engineer. None of this mattered to my parents, and I spent years trying to understand why. Priya was the easy daughter. Not because she was smarter or kinder or more talented. She was, in fact, none of those things in any significant measure. She was easier because she needed more. She called home every day. She cried at the right moments. She required management, which my parents had mistaken somewhere along the way for love. I was independent. I didn't call every day. I didn't need to be managed. And in the Calloway family, a child who doesn't need constant attention is a child who is easy to set aside. I told myself this was the whole story. I told myself this for years. I was wrong. The first thing that didn't add up was so small that I almost dismissed it entirely. It was a Tuesday in November 2021. I had gone home for Thanksgiving early, a week before the holiday, to help my mother prepare, which I did every year because Priya was too busy and nobody questioned why. I was in the kitchen opening a bag of flour when I noticed a manila folder on the kitchen counter. The folder was labeled, in my mother's handwriting, Tax Miss 2014. I would not have thought anything of it except for one detail: the folder was open, and the document on top was not a tax document. It was a wire transfer confirmation from a Wells Fargo account I didn't recognize in the amount of $22,400, dated September 14, 2014. My name was not anywhere on the document, neither was my father's. The sending account name read Calloway Family Trust, Secondary. I didn't know there was a Calloway Family Trust. I certainly didn't know there was a secondary one. I closed the folder and went back to the flour. I didn't say anything. I don't know exactly why. Some part of me, the part that had been well-trained, decided I had misread it. She wouldn't do that. She's my mother. But I started keeping notes, dates, things I overheard, amounts my parents mentioned casually. I don't know why I started doing it. Some part of me had already decided I was going to need it. The triggering event happened at my sister's wedding, June 18th, 2022. The Driscoll Hotel in downtown Austin, $34,000 rental for the weekend. My father paid for the entire wedding. My mother wore a $6,200 Monique LaHulia gown. Priya's dress was custom. I was not asked to be a bridesmaid. I was not asked to give a speech. I was assigned table 7 in the seating chart. I was shown 3 weeks before the event, and when I texted my mother to ask if that was a mistake, she replied, "You'll be comfortable there. You don't really know anyone at the head tables." I did not say another word about it. I bought a $4,800 dress from a boutique on South Congress Avenue. I arrived on time. I smiled at everyone who looked at me, and then my father stood up. "I want to say something about my daughters. Priya has always been our pride." I watched Priya beam. She was 27 years old, and she had never paid a bill in her life. A fact I knew because I had once, accidentally, seen my parents' bank statement while helping reconcile their bookkeeping during a visit. I had seen a line item, Priya monthly, $3,200. I had never been given $3,200 a month. I had never been given any monthly stipend. I had never been given anything except the expectation that I was fine and didn't need to ask. And then there's Maya. Another pause. Maya has always been her own thing. We don't always understand her choices. We don't always agree with her direction. But she's family. That was it. That was the entirety of what my father had to say about me at my sister's wedding. She's family. As a conclusion, as a consolation, the applause was polite and confused. 2 women at table 7, people I did not know, friends of the groom, looked at me with an expression I recognized immediately. It was pity, clean, uncomplicated, stranger's pity. I picked up my champagne glass and took a long, slow sip. I did not cry. I did not excuse myself. I sat at table 7 for the next 4 hours and smiled at everyone who approached me and said things like, "Your speech was lovely." And I said thank you because it was easier than explaining that I had not given one. What I did, very quietly, while the band played and my sister danced with her new husband, was take out my phone and start a note. I titled it Things I Know. I typed for about 20 minutes. Then I put my phone away. At 10:47 p.m., while the dessert cart was being rolled out, my phone buzzed. I looked down at the screen. The text was from a number I didn't recognize. Area code 512, Austin. It read, "Are you Maya Calloway, daughter of Richard Calloway? I have information about the Calloway Family Trust that I think you need to see. I'm sorry to contact you like this. I've been trying to figure out the right way to do this for 2 years. I read it 4 times. Then I typed back, yes. Who is this? 3 dots. Then my name is Daniel Osei. I used to work at Whitmore Associates. I was your grandfather's estate attorney, and I think you've been lied to about a lot of things for a very long time. I did not respond to Daniel Osei that night. I went home to my apartment on Rainy Street, took off the $4,800 dress, and sat at my kitchen table until 2 a.m. with my laptop open and every document I had ever kept. Bank statements I'd photographed, wire transfer records I'd screenshotted, the notes I'd started keeping in November 2021, spread across my screen. And I want you to remember this detail because it comes back later in a way that shocked even my lawyer. I had almost thrown away those notes 3 months earlier. I had told myself I was being paranoid. I had almost deleted the entire folder. I'm glad I didn't. The next morning I called Daniel Osei. He answered on the second ring. He explained, in the measured voice of a man who had been holding something carefully for a long time, that he had worked at Whitmore Associates, a probate and estate law firm at 1807 West 35th Street in Austin, for 11 years. He had been the junior attorney on my grandfather's estate. My grandfather, Vikram Mehta, had died in October 2017. He had been, by all accounts, a man of quiet, considerable wealth, the founder of a small manufacturing company that he had sold in 1998 for $4.1 million. Before he died, Vikram Mehta had established the Mehta Family Education and Legacy Trust. He had named 2 beneficiaries, his daughter Sunita, my mother, and his granddaughter Maya Calloway, me. He had left my mother $800,000. He had left me $1.4 million. The trust had been set up to distribute to me in 3 tranches, $400,000 at age 25, $500,000 at age 28, and $500,000 at age 30. I was 28 years old. I had received none of it. I sat very still on my couch for what felt like a long time. Then I said, very quietly, "How is that possible?" Daniel told me. And every sentence he spoke was a door opening onto a room I had not known existed. My mother was the trustee. That was the mechanism. Vikram Mehta had named his daughter as trustee, which was standard practice for family trusts, a decision based on the assumption that a mother would not steal from her own child. He had not been wrong to assume this, probably. He had simply not anticipated that his daughter would discover, sometime between 2017 and 2019, that managing a $2.2 million estate was more interesting than sharing it. The first tranche, $400,000, had been due to me on my 25th birthday. March 3, 2019, I had not received it. What I had received, on March 3, 2019, was a phone call from my mother telling me that my grandfather's estate was tied up in probate and would take a while to settle. I remembered that phone call. I remembered thinking it was strange because I hadn't even known I was a beneficiary. I had asked my mother, and she had said something like, "Oh, Papa left a small amount for you, but there are legal complications." I had not pursued it. It had not occurred to me to pursue it. Daniel had been the one preparing the initial distribution paperwork. He had flagged the discrepancy. The trust clearly named Maya Calloway as a primary beneficiary, but the trustee had directed the first distribution to a secondary account, not to the beneficiary. He had raised this concern to the senior partner at Whitmore Associates. He had been told to proceed as directed. When he pushed back, he was informed that his contract would not be renewed. He had left the firm in April 2019. He had spent 2 years trying to figure out what to do with what he knew. "Why didn't you contact me sooner?" I asked. A pause. "I wasn't sure you knew about the trust at all. I didn't know how to reach you without going through your parents, and Honestly, I was afraid of what would happen to me professionally if I was wrong." He wasn't wrong. On July 12, 2022, 24 days after my sister's wedding, I sat down with Amanda Torres, Esquire, of Torres Whitfield LLP, in her office on the 6th floor of a building on Congress Avenue in Austin. I had found her through a referral from a colleague whose family had gone through a trust dispute. I brought everything: the notes, the photos, the screenshots, the text exchanges with Daniel Osei, and a manila folder of my own. Inside it were the documents I had spent 3 weeks obtaining, slowly, legally, carefully, from the Texas Secretary of State's office, the Travis County Probate Court, and my own grandfather's public estate filing, probate case number 2019 PR 4421. Filed in Travis County. Trustee, Sunita Calloway Nee Mehta. Amanda Torres read through everything without speaking. When she finished, she set the documents down and looked at me for a moment. "Miss Calloway," she said, "I want to be straightforward with you. This is a significant breach of fiduciary duty, potentially criminal." "How significant?" She tapped a number on the document with her pen. It was the total in the secondary account, the Calloway Family Trust Secondary, where my distributions had been redirected. The number was $312,000. That was just the first tranche, partially distributed over 3 years in smaller transfers to avoid triggering reporting thresholds. I sat there for what felt like a very long time. Then I said very quietly, "What do I need to do to make sure they never do this to anyone again?" If something about this story is hitting close to home right now, if you're watching this and thinking, "I know exactly what it feels like to not be chosen by the people who are supposed to choose you first," drop the word "same" in the comments. I read every single one. The next 6 months were the quietest period of my adult life. I did not contact my parents. I did not tell Priya. I went to work every day at Meridian Tech Solutions on Barton Springs Road, wrote clean code, attended stand-up meetings, ate lunch at my desk, went home. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Renata Flores, on West 6th Street for the first time in my life, and I cried in her office approximately every session for the first 2 months. Meanwhile, Amanda Torres was building a case. She had retained a forensic accountant, James Whitfield, her firm partner, who spent 8 weeks tracing every transfer out of the Mehta Family Education and Legacy Trust. What he found was not just one misdirection. It was a system. Between October 2017 and June 2022, a period of almost 5 years, my mother had made 38 transfers from the trust to the secondary account. The amounts ranged from $4,200 to $42,000. They were timed at irregular intervals to avoid pattern detection. The total was $386,000. Some of the money had paid for Priya's down payment on her house in the Bolden Creek neighborhood, $67,000 in February 2020. Some of it had paid for Priya's monthly stipend, the $3,200 I had once noticed on a bank statement. Some of it had paid for my parents' vacation to Rajasthan, India in December 2019, which I knew about because I had seen the Instagram photos, my money, spent, without a single conversation with me. On January 14, 2023, Amanda Torres filed a civil complaint in Travis County District Court, Callaway v. Callaway, case number 2023 CV-119, breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment, conversion. She also forwarded the forensic accountant's report to the Financial Crimes Unit of the Austin Field Office of the FBI. I learned that the FBI had opened a preliminary inquiry on a Wednesday morning when Amanda called me before 9 a.m. I was still in bed. I remember the exact quality of the light through my bedroom curtains. Pale January light, flat and gray. I did not feel triumphant. I want to be honest about that. I felt terrified and sad and very, very tired. My mother called me for the first time in 3 months, on January 19, 2023. 5 days after the filing, I answered. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to hear what she would say. Maya, her voice was careful, controlled. I need you to understand something. The decisions I made about the trust were made to protect this family. Your grandfather's estate was complicated. There were tax implications, there were decisions that needed to be made quickly. I let her speak. I didn't interrupt. We thought you'd be fine, she continued. You've always been fine. You had a good salary. You didn't need it the way... She stopped herself just short of finishing that sentence. The way Priya did? I said, silence, Mom. My voice was very even. I had rehearsed this not for drama, but because I had learned in 6 months of therapy and document review that I was not going to get to say this twice. I have the bank records. All of them. I have the transfer dates, the account numbers, and the forensic accounting report. My attorney has them too. So does the FBI. A very long pause. You don't understand what we were dealing with, she finally said. Her voice had changed. Something hard and cold had come into it that I had heard before, usually directed at service workers, at people she thought were beneath her. I had never heard it directed at me before. I'm your mother. I made sacrifices for this family that you will never understand. I know, I said, and you have 30 days to respond to the civil complaint. I hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor for about 15 minutes. Then I got up, made coffee, and sent Amanda Torres an email summarizing the conversation. The deposition was scheduled for March 3, 2023. My 29th birthday. I am aware that is a detail that could read as poetic or contrived. It was neither. It was simply the date that worked for everyone's schedules. The deposition took place at Torres Whitfield LLP's conference room. My mother arrived with her own attorney, Garrett Hines of Hines Blackwood, a civil litigation firm in downtown Austin. My father was not present. I found out later that he and my mother had retained separate counsel. That told me everything I needed to know about how frightened they were. I arrived in a navy blazer and black slacks. I had slept well the night before. I had eaten breakfast. I had done everything my therapist told me to do to stay grounded, which sounds small until you understand that for most of my life, walking into a room where my parents were had made my hands shake. They did not shake. That morning, my mother sat across the conference table from me. She was wearing a pale green silk blouse and her gold earrings, the one she wore when she wanted to signal composure. She looked at me when she walked in. I looked back. Neither of us said anything. Amanda placed the forensic accounting report on the table, then the trust documents, then the transfer records, printed and organized by date in a binder, one document per truth. Every page another layer falling away. The deposition lasted 4 hours. My mother's attorney objected frequently. My mother answered many questions with I don't recall, and I would need to consult my records, a strategy so transparent that it would have been insulting if it weren't also somewhat pathetic. At one point, Garrett Hines requested a brief recess. During the recess, I stepped into the hallway to get water. My mother was there. We were alone for approximately 45 seconds. She said, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you act?" I looked at her for a moment, not with anger. I had moved past anger around November 2022 in a session with Dr. Flores where I had cried for 50 minutes and come out the other side feeling something quieter and more permanent. "Yes," I said, "this is how I act." I went back into the conference room and the deposition resumed. What I found on that forensic accounting report, I've shown you most of it. But there was one more layer, one more thing that I need to tell you about before I can get to what happened next. Because what made the FBI's involvement more than preliminary was not the $386,000 in redirected trust distributions. It was a second document that James Whitfield, the forensic accountant, found buried in the trust administration records. In September 2020, while I was 26, working at Meridian Tech, unaware that any of this existed, my mother had amended the trust document. She had filed the amendment through a notary in Pflugerville, Texas, a suburb northeast of Austin. The amendment adjusted the distribution schedule. It reduced my second tranche from $500,000 to $85,000. It redirected the remaining $415,000 to a family education reserve account. The family education reserve account had been used in the following 14 months to pay for Priya's graduate school tuition at the University of Texas McCombs School of Business, $82.00, and to fund 3 subsequent payments to the Callaway Family Trust Secondary. The amendment had been signed by my mother as trustee. It had also been signed by a co-trustee. That co-trustee was my father. I want you to understand what that means legally. It means that my father, the man who stood at my sister's wedding and said she's family as a consolation, had signed a document in September 2020 that legally redirected $415,000 away from his daughter. He had known. He had not just allowed it, he had authorized it. When Amanda Torres showed me the co-trustee signature, I stared at it for a while. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was the same handwriting that had signed my report cards, the same handwriting on birthday cards I had kept in a box in my closet for my entire adult life. I had kept birthday cards from a man who had signed away my inheritance. I went home that night and put the birthday cards in a recycling bag and set the bag outside by the curb. The civil case settled on August 8, 2023. Callaway v. Callaway, under the terms of the settlement, which I am not prohibited from discussing because I refused to sign a non-disclosure agreement, a point I insisted on and for which my attorney initially thought I was being difficult. My parents agreed to the following: full restitution of $386,000 in redirected trust distributions, plus 6 years of interest calculated at 7 per annum, $547,220 total. The reinstatement of my original trust distribution schedule, including the corrected second tranche of $500,000 due at age 28. An acknowledgement on record that the 2020 trust amendment was executed in breach of the original grantor's intent. The FBI inquiry resulted in a deferred prosecution agreement, requiring my parents to submit to financial monitoring for 3 years and cooperate fully with the civil recovery. No criminal charges were filed. I want to be honest about that. I had wanted charges. Amanda told me that deferred prosecution was the realistic outcome for a first-time financial crime between family members with clean records and full cooperation. I did not feel justice had been served. I felt something more ambiguous, that the system had done what systems do, which is to produce an outcome, not a reckoning. My father lost 3 major clients when word of the FBI inquiry reached Austin's business community. Word travels in a city that size, and a logistics consulting firm depends on trust in a way that is not metaphorical. Callaway Integrated Solutions lost $1.1 million in annual contracts between September 2023 and February 2024. He has not publicly addressed any of it. Priya called me in October 2023. I did not answer. She left a voicemail that said, "Maya, I need you to know I had no idea about any of this. I swear to God, please call me back." I have not verified whether she knew. I have not decided whether it matters. There is one person I want to tell you about before I close this out. Her name is Kezia Okonkwo. She is a senior product manager at Meridian Tech Solutions. My colleague for 3 years, a person I had always liked and never allowed close to me because I had spent my entire adult life managing the amount of space I let other people occupy. Kezia found out something was wrong with me in September 2022, not because I told her, but because she is observant in the particular way that certain people are, which is quietly and without making a production of it. She showed up at my desk one afternoon with 2 coffees and said, "You don't have to tell me anything, but I'm available if you want company." That was it. That was all she said. I started talking to her in November 2022. By March 2023, she was the person I called after the deposition. By August 2023, she was the person who sat with me in Amanda Torres's conference room when the settlement was finalized and said nothing at all, because there was nothing to say, and because she understood that I had spent 29 years believing that independence meant needing nothing and no one. What I had actually been doing was making it easy for people to take from me by never asking for anything in return. Kezia is still my person. That is the best thing that came out of all of this. It is March 2024 now, and some mornings I still wake up and forget for just a second that things are different. I think about the house in Terrytown. I think about the framed photo in the living room, the one where I am half out of frame. I think about table 7, and then I remember what I know. If you're watching this and you're still in the middle of your version of this story, still sitting at the wrong table, still making yourself smaller so the people around you feel bigger, still explaining away the manila folders you find on countertops, I want you to hear something. The fact that you're questioning it means you already know the truth. You've known for a while. You've just been protecting them from the consequences of your knowing. You are allowed to stop protecting them. You don't owe anyone your silence just because they're family. If this story meant something to you today, not just as something to watch, but as something you needed to hear, share it with one person. You probably already know exactly who. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, subscribe. I'll be here,